Well, good afternoon, good evening, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes, and it is always a pleasure to be here. I did take last Friday off because I wanted to actually celebrate my birthday, and it was so much fun. I had the best time, so I appreciate your patience with my schedule lately, and I appreciate the fact that all of you are concerned about me, are sending me your love and thoughts, and I also want to thank my friend Mario for always being there. Every show, Mario is there. He has been a huge supporter and friend of mine for a long time. I want to thank Peter for getting information out about UFO Classified to different social media sites. I want to thank Amy. I love you, Amy. You and Dinah, I'm glad that both of you are safe. And I want to thank the people that donate on a monthly basis to UFO Classified to help pay for the expense of doing the show. And also people who are making donations to help me preserve history, which is not a task that you can do lightly. It has cost a lot of money over the years. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about doing research and how much this actually costs each and every one of us who is truly dedicated to the subject. And we're not doing YouTube shows and making a ton of money. We're doing it because we actually care about the content of the subject. And for me, I've always really felt that it would be wonderful if I had 70,000 subscribers or listeners, but so basically like, subscribe, that should be my plan there. Like, subscribe, this is a good thing, share. But it is more important for me to get information out to people who genuinely understand the subject, who want to know the truth, who aren't being fooled by these false prophets of disclosure. Because at the end of the day, the people that are talking about disclosure and the fact it's coming, they've been saying that for decades now, and clearly that's not working out for them. So, on that note, I just had to throw that out there. I want to bring your attention before I bring my guest tonight on, who's been on the show before, but I want to talk a little bit about the UFO Trail, Jack Brewer's latest blog, which is the DIA further verifies OSAP award to Bass, fails to locate Skinwalker report. I'm going to read this to you a little bit so you can understand what's going on, because I think that, we've got Team Lou, who is promoting a certain narrative, and Team Skinwalker that's promoting, obviously, their narrative to fill people at conferences, fill seats at conferences and things like that. But I want to just show you this or read this to you. The Defense Intelligence Agency issued final responses to a pair of FOIA requests by email today, one of which further substantiates Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies was awarded a contract in the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program. He also has the documents which you can view on his website. The contract award was previously established in 2019 at the UFO Trail through FOIA after acting on a lead uncovered by researcher Keith Basterfield. The most recent documents provided by the DIA consist of 5 files totaling 36 pages issued in the response to a 2018 request for all contracts undertaken with and funding provided to BASS. The documents include a file containing a 2008 contract and a 2009 amended contract. It goes on to list the contract number and says the 2000, I'm going to just fast forward here a little bit so we can get to our guest. The 2008 contract indicates some $10 million were allocated to be paid to BASS from the National Security Agency. Also included in the most recent FOIA response in 2009, apparent DIA memo, subject review of advanced aerospace contract deliverables. The memo states the goal of the contract is to identify key technologies and physics concepts that would support revolutionary aerospace vehicle research and development. Contracted studies were designed to provide a prioritized list of technologies, concepts that would then drive detailed focused searches into foreign aerospace research development. Okay, that's a big shocker, isn't it? I'm so glad that Jack Brewer is writing this, and hopefully some of you can take note of this. The 2009 info memo goes on to state the reviews of technical reports were performed by 3 research staff members at Sandia National Laboratories. It is suggested reviews were favorable and involving work might be useful to the Defense Intelligence or Department agencies, circumstances we might question given the apparent discontinuation of the project and shuttering of BASS. In the second response received today, the DIA stated no report was located as described by James T. Latatsky and co-authors. The report referenced in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon and is said to be titled Utah Ranch Investigation, August 2009 to February 2010, was unavailable after a search was conducted. My goodness, that's certainly interesting, isn't it? And it goes to show some of the things that I've been talking about for a long time here. And as we know, I think most of you with common sense, that Skinwalker Ranch is certainly not what it appears to be, at least by their marketing team. So anyway, you can go to UFO Trail Blogspot to read more about that. And on that note, I am going to add to the stream my friend, Rob Wytek. Rob, it's so nice to see you.
It's great to see you, Erica, and always a pleasure to be on your show, and thanks for having me.
Well, you know what? I will say that you're one of the brave few people in MUFON that would come on the show. So thank you for that. I mean, I've always appreciated the fact that you've been very kind and professional and courteous to me, and you've gone along with questions that I've asked that have probably been uncomfortable over the years, but you've done it, and that really says a lot about you as a person. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. If there's one thing I don't like, it's non-transparency or opaqueness. So I do try to be as honest as I can on things. And obviously in MUFON on the board, there's some things I can't say or talk about, but that's to be expected with any board of directors of any organization. But I try to be as transparent as I can about my thoughts and beliefs and my answers to any questions, yours, and are, always fun to work with and to speak to and answer. But some questioning I've got from other hosts, shall I say, is it can become very uncomfortable sometimes.
Right, absolutely. I know it can, and I've been in situations like that as well, and it does get uncomfortable. And like I said, I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate your professionalism. You've always been that way with me since the first time we spoke. I also really appreciate your understanding of the subject, your appreciation of the historical aspect that needs to be preserved, and all of these things. I think that's really, it's fun to know people like you, and I think if it weren't for people like you, and Barry Greenwood and things, I would have just thrown my hands in the air and said, peace out, I'm done.
We would have dragged you back in.
Oh dear Lord. Well, I'm sure there were some people who would be on the other team. But that's okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about your background, because you have such a fascinating background. But you've obviously had a fascination with the subject since, 1968?
Yeah, that goes back that far. Hard to believe. Yeah.
Wow. So you must have been like 2?
That's a nice, that's a good way of putting it. I was very precocious at 2, and was interested in the University of Colorado UFO study, and people couldn't believe a 2-year-old, knew all that stuff.
Amazing. It's just amazing. You were truly gifted, so that's wonderful. But you've lectured at conferences all over the United States. You have a degree in physics and earth science, which is so cool, which paved the way for your job at the U.S. Patent Office. And so talk a little bit about that, because that sounds like a fun job. At least to me. It could be tedious, but...
Well, you put your finger on the 2 aspects of the job. Some parts of it are fun, and some parts of it are tedious. But basically, I worked at the office for my entire career, 30 plus years. And Eric, I was in a number of different areas where they assign you subject matter when you come in, sort of based on your background. So I had a background in physics, and I found myself, to begin with, working on animal husbandry, dentistry, and games. So if you can see logic behind that, I can't. But nonetheless...
But I'm sure there are people that might be listening that could.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is, and I'm not casting aspersions on the patent office, they get hundreds of thousands of patent applications a year, and they have to have people examining them. And those people have to have background in engineering, backgrounds in engineering or science. So somebody has to work on applications that involve cutlery and saddles and paper clips, and they might be physicists. So, but by and by, as years went on, I moved into the aviation area, and that's where I spent like the last 16 years or so of my career working in aviation and aeronautics. And that part was interesting, and training people and working with the attorneys who are very smart, perceptive individuals. It's fun to work out and get somebody a patent. I liked doing that. What I didn't like too much is that what's basically unknown to maybe the public at large about the patent office is that because of the sheer number of applications that come in, every examiner in the office, it can't take their time on working on applications. They have to meet a quota, if you want to think of it like that. Mm-hmm. And cases have to be done in so many hours to keep things moving and keep cases flowing and get deal with the backlog, as it were. So that got a little not only tedious but stressful.
Wow.
But that aside, working and training examiners and working with the attorneys to hammer out language for allowable patent claims and getting a person on a patent, that was a very satisfying part of the job, I have to admit.
Oh, I bet you've seen some fascinating things and met some really interesting and diverse people over the years. So that's a really cool job.
Yeah, that part is true, what you just said.
I bet. And so what is the best project that you've worked on? What is the coolest patent that you can think of that you've been involved with that process?
That's kind of hard to say, because it ends up being, you work on thousands of them and allow thousands of them. But yeah, I did. I guess the ones that were closest to my heart, and there were only 2 or 3 of these, were because I was working in the aviation and aeronautics area. That encompasses aircraft that are circular shaped. So every once in a while, I would get an application across my desk that was to a disc-shaped flying machine. It wasn't made by aliens. It was made by humans on Earth, engineers and scientists, and they would be literally flying saucers. And they had jet engines on the back of them and maybe a jet engine on the bottom of them to give them lift. And those were always fascinating to work on. And I appreciated sort of the irony behind me having my avocation UFO study and research, and then here during my day job, as it were, I get an application on my desk that's drawn to a circular aircraft that I have to work on. So I can truly say that although there may be other elements of the government that are working on true UFOs, the patent office really does work on flying saucers, at least the man-made variety.
And so, I mean, but how much of, we talk a lot about like the reverse engineering and recovered craft and things like that. I mean, what is your take seeing that behind the scenes? I mean, do you really think that this is being engineered because we've got pieces of recovered spacecraft?
I don't, Erica. And of course, I'm not privy to the entire panoply of technology. I didn't work in materials science, for example, or I wasn't a metallurgist or ever get an application along those lines. But all the applications I ever dealt with basically used known or maybe cutting edge technologies to make them work. But they were understandable to people who were, as they say in the patent art, skilled in the art, skilled practitioners. And anytime an application would come by that seemed to deal with, someone would say, oh, I have this device powered by anti-gravity, they would be asked to prove it. Or what do you mean? How did you do that? Can you give us the technique and explain it so that we can understand it? They couldn't resort to this kind of stuff. It had to be on science and physics and engineering as we currently understand it. And I never saw anything that really, some things came close to the line, but I never saw anything that I patented that I could truly say, wow, I don't understand that at all, but I think this person deserves a patent. I did not do that.
Okay. And so what do you think, and I just got to, kind of go off into this land for a moment, but like, what do you think about Bob Lazar's claims?
Wow, you're taking me back there. Bob Lazar is it's an understatement to say he's a complicated individual. But when he initially came out, I think at the end of the 80s or so, around 1990, 1988 maybe, I recall hearing what he was talking about, element 115, I think it was, or 114, something that we hadn't yet produced any measurable quantities of. And his descriptions of what element 115 slash 114, whatever it was, should be, didn't match the properties that elements at that point in the periodic table and at that number in the periodic table should possess. In other words, he didn't really know what he was talking about when it came to this element. It probably would be highly radioactive. If you did have it, it probably wouldn't last for much more than a second or two. It was very evanescent, or at least the cutting edge elements at the higher number elements are always lasting for only fragments of a second. They're not stable like aluminum would be, or oxygen would be, or something like that. So he just didn't seem to grasp that. Now, maybe that's how element 115 is, but it wouldn't then fit at the proper place in the periodic chart if it had other properties. And I recall being at a UFO conference, I think it was at the University of Virginia at the time, and I think maybe Rima Lebow or someone like that was the abduction researcher was holding it there, although I might be a little off on that. But I sat in a sort of a room, an auditorium, with a whole bunch of people who knew a lot more about science than I did. PhD types, and like Bruce Maccabee was there, and other people. And none of them took what Lazar, and Lazar's comments were being sort of projected on a large screen in front of everybody. And those people, although people like Maccabee certainly believe something is going on with the UFO subject, none of them could take Lazar very seriously at all. They just knew they were listening to a neophyte, someone who didn't know too much about advanced physics or science or technology.
Interesting.
That's not all I have to say, but there are other aspects of him that are very puzzling. I can't quite explain.
Right.
He apparently did spend some time working with, the lab out there. Was it Keller's lab or something like that?
Yeah, and I mean, I've got to ask you too, because why would you've got this, journalist, George Knapp, Peabody Award-winning journalist, who's promoting someone like that, even though there are all sorts of red flags about his identity, but that seems to be okay. I mean, what is your take on that? Do you think, I don't know, is there some sort of disinformation game going? Is there like what is that all about?
There could be, Erica, and I'm not going to try to speculate too much on that, because I don't know too much about the man. I've read some on him. I have my doubts about him. He didn't have the right background, but there he is, being vouchsafed all these tremendous secrets of the universe, as it were. None of that makes sense, as you say, but he's a paradox, and I can't explain how he came to be in some of the places he apparently was in for at least a short period of time. And maybe that's the operative thing here. He didn't have a career lasting for years and years and years with the government or with any of these labs. It was very short, less than 6 months, as I recall.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for just, talking a little bit about that. I want to go back to, because I've got some great comments in chat, but Peter from Shadowy Spectrums, I'm sure it'll get better too, but he wants to know if you know anything about Salvatore Cesar Pius. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but his controversial U.S. Navy UFO patents.
Yeah, I do. I haven't looked at that lately. I do know about that patent, however. I will say that the primary examiner on that patent is a good friend of mine. And anyhow, Pius seems to have come up with this device. The claims to it are, he's the inventor. He got a patent to it. He's got a number of patents. I think he has 5 actual patents. But they describe a device that's capable of fantastic speeds. It can apparently move through water at extraordinarily high velocities that currently submarines or any underwater craft we have can't move at. When you read his patent, and it's very short, as I recall, and if I knew you were going to talk about this, I would have boned up a little bit more on it. That he has 1 page of drawings or 2 pages of drawings. They're very simple drawings for this amazing quote unquote craft. And his patent specification is very short. And the end of a patent application, a patent specification, always is followed by something we call the patent claims. The claims define your invention. those are what you say. I produced a new invention and I claim it is this, and you describe it in words, and they're very, very short, and they're very almost simple. I would think this craft that can do all these amazing things, if you read the claims, there isn't much you need to build this craft and make it work. And I just have reservations as to whether this could be reduced to practice. He did get it through the Navy. He worked at the Navy at the time. As I recall, the Patent Office never found any prior references to apply against his claims. They gave him a rejection. The Patent Office gave him a rejection based on the principles that are set forth in the patent applications aren't accepted by physics currently, physics as we currently know it. The application was going to go to the Board of Appeals, and at that point, the Patent Office pulled back their rejection and issued the case. I think it was because of my reading on this that the prosecution for Pius presented papers and documents that had been in the public domain, in scientific reports or conference proceedings, that seemed to accept some of the principles that Pius had set forth in his patent application. And long story short, I think this is me speculation because I never spoke with anyone about this. I think the office may have pulled back from that rejection, knowing that they could not sustain it at the board. So they withdrew this rejection and passed the case to issue. And again, this case too, this application is a bit of a conundrum, because I can tell you that if this device really, it was believed by the government, by the Navy who filed the application, that this device really could do the things that it claims to do, it would have been classified. The application would have been classified. And I speak from firsthand knowledge of some stuff like that. So the application would be kept classified until such time as the subject matter could be made public. It might be 20 or 30 years from now. Then the inventor would be granted a patent. But it would languish for however many years it took to get unclassified.
Wow.
But this patent application was not. But if you could make this, Russia could make this, or China could make this, or any hostile power could make this invention, as Pius describes in his application, they would dominate the world, or at least they would dominate the military aspect of the world. So that's why I just don't think it can be. It has been reduced to practice. I wish I could give you the number right here. I could recite the number on the for you, but I just don't have it right at my hand here. It would take me 10 minutes to get it.
Well, and I have a feeling that somebody in the listening audience could get that, and they probably will.
It's very you can go to Google Patents and put his inventor's name in. PAIS is the last name, and put patent, and it's 10 million something or other. I can't remember the other 6 digits, but you will get it forthright.
That is awesome. And I just want to, again, I just have to give a shout out to the people that are listening to the show tonight and say, hey, Sean B. Baker, all of you that are here and asking an alien scientist, asking great questions and getting into the chat. And I really think that this is such a wonderful, needed dialogue to have. And that's what I love about people that listen to UFO Classified. Everyone's respectful and people are knowledgeable about things. And so I really, really love that. And so Amy Collins wants me to ask you, Rob, are there some patents that are ITAR restricted? ITAR.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that acronym means. I will try to answer that question to the best of my knowledge. Yes, there are classified patent applications, and there aren't hundreds of thousands of them. There may be 10,000, 20,000 maybe. I don't know. The Patent Office does maintain classified patent applications that the other branches of the military say have to be classified. The Patent Office doesn't make that decision, but the Department of Defense makes that decision. And those applications, and I'm not saying anything here that isn't known publicly, those applications are examined by a special corps of examiners who are cleared. And they work on those applications even though they are classified. And if they find that the subject matter is allowable, they send a notice to the inventor, to the inventor's attorney, that all the claims in your application have been allowed. However, we cannot grant you a patent at this time because the subject matter is classified. Of course, the inventor would know it by that point. And there the application sits for, like I said, however many years or months it takes for the subject matter to become unclassified, or it's deemed that it can be released to the public. So you have the odd phenomenon of patents being issued in 2022 that might have been worked on in 1965, and they come out as a patent. And you can look and you can see when the patent application was filed, and you'll see, oh, it's 1965. Wow, that must have been classified. And a lot of them have to do with radar and stealth technology, stuff any of us could identify, like what it must be. Explosive compositions, maybe, who knows? But this kind of stuff, and cryptography, all that kind of stuff, it's generally classified, and eventually they come out. But that's kind of a long answer to the question of are there ITAR classified applications? There are classified applications, but not a hell of a lot of them.
So it's international traffic in arms.
Oh, I can't. I never saw that when I was at the patent office. If I was assigned something, it would be, the level of classification would be given, and there's a way of working on these applications, and I never heard of that designation, but it's, who knows.
Well, I mean, you would probably know quite a bit more than most people. So anyway, I appreciate that. So thank you for answering some of the questions, and I'm sure we'll have a few more from my wonderful audience tonight.
Yeah, those are good questions.
Yeah, they really are. I love it. And so I've got to ask you, because there's some questions that if I don't ask about, then of course, obviously, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence. But what is...
You sound like a patent attorney, okay.
Well, I pretend. I've taken lots of acting classes. It's good. But so what is have you heard anything at all about Jan Harzan? I know this is a touchy subject.
Yeah, no, I know.
I know that people have been wanting to know. We definitely have had people ask that questions about Mr. Harzan as of late. So
yeah, that's a good question, and it's a fair question. It's a question that I ask people too myself, because there isn't really a good answer. The latest answer I know is the following. He was charged, I think, with in the Irvine Police Department or Orange County or something like that in California. But anyhow, that's the docket his case is on. Whoever controls the district for Irvine, where Jan lives or lived. And you can pay a small fee, and you can find out how this court case is proceeding. And the charges against Jan were brought, I believe, in July of 2019. Or maybe, I guess it's 2019, I guess is what it was. I'm forgetting here now, but nonetheless, it's been 2 or 3 years. But it doesn't matter how many years it's been, because the case keeps, every time it comes, he gets a court date, the file then says, oh, it's been pushed forward into the future again. He gets a continuance. And instead of it coming up for consideration in April 2022, you'll look and it'll say the continuance is now June 2022. And this has happened, I guess it's 2020 now, so it'd be two years coming up on that. It's happened continuously for that entire time. And I think they might have had him in court to explain the charges being brought against him, but it hasn't progressed at all. And this, I heard just a few days ago what the latest status of his case is, and it's what I said. It's just another continuation. It's the long, you see and anybody can ultimately find this. There's nothing. You pay $5 or something. You can look up anybody's court case in the county there, and there's nothing to say. It's just always being pushed forward. Nobody, to my knowledge, in MUFON on the board has spoken with the man since a couple days after these revelations came out, when they had to ask him about certain things like, Jan, when you leave the office, can you leave the key behind?
Wow.
Turn the computers off, this type thing. And I can assure you the locks would have been changed pretty quickly on the door after he went out. But nonetheless, no one's spoken to him on that I know of on the board since maybe late July of 2020 or something like that. And it was just formal matters that they had to deal with to have the organization keep running.
Yeah, I know I know we spoke around that time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you were on the show maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit after, but I mean, I'm sure that must have been a huge shock, and then trying to figure out how to run defense with that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, again, you addressing this subject. And I will say, being, having to go through a multitude of court cases with my domestic abuse situation, it's been a year, and then we're pushing it out for a few more months, and then
Mm-hmm.
we've got this pretrial, blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's so many, it does take a long time for things to get going in our judicial system, and
Mm-hmm.
that's especially with COVID and different things that have been taking place. I'm sure that is bogged down
That's a
the
good point.
system.
COVID probably had something to do with it, and the days of quick and speedy trials just don't seem to be here anymore.
No, I'm thinking not, and yeah, so I can understand that absolutely. So yeah, thank you for addressing that. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about another. I just have to laugh. John Ventry he was running for governor.
Yeah.
And luckily that nothing happened with that, I could say, but he certainly puts a lot of money behind it and gives it a good try. But his slogan, his billboard slogan, was never socialist. Very catchy.
Yeah, I don't hear too much about Ventry in MUFON anymore. At one time, as you know, he was state director for Pennsylvania. I can't recall now, but yeah, he was pretty active in the organization and donated a certain amount of money to the organization. But he's had his problems, and he continues an interest in UFOs, and he still runs conferences, I believe. And to the best of my knowledge, MUFON headquarters has nothing to do with him officially. So if John runs a conference, he's doing it on his own.
Interesting.
I haven't seen him for years personally.
Then that's probably I mean, that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's probably
I
right.
mean, and so, but it is interesting, it's like you've got, an organization full of volunteers, a nonprofit, and, you get all sorts of people, and that must be hard from an administrator's perspective to try to deal with the different personalities, the different, backgrounds and things. And I think for some people, and how does the MUFON Board of Directors address specific people who are in leadership positions of MUFON that are promoting perhaps a religious or a political agenda instead of focusing on the scientific study of UFOs?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy, but we can stop people from having their religious viewpoints and studying that, or having political aspirations or whatever it might be. But they really, MUFON doesn't like it when they start seeing it on, making this up, sort of, if someone were to put it on their MUFON state website, pick a state X or something like that, and suddenly there's a lot of political stuff on the MUFON state. I'll just make up something here, but it doesn't mean it's his state at all, like Illinois or something like that, or Vermont. If they put it on the MUFON Vermont, a lot of political stuff, or a lot of religious stuff that didn't have any connection whatsoever to the UFO subject. It's one thing to talk about government involvement with UFOs. It's another thing to talk about, what the government is or is not doing with something outside of the UFO subject, and that they wouldn't want to see. So the director would ask the person to remove it from their website, and put it on something else. If it's an embarrassing thing, then I think the person would be asked, like Ventry, asked to leave MUFON immediately. But if it's more run-of-the-mill political things or theology of some type, they would be asked to move it from any association with MUFON whatsoever, and deal with it somewhere else. And if they refuse to do that, they'd obviously be let go or asked to leave.
Right. And I mean, I know that
It
that's
does
hard
happen
to.
once in a while.
Yeah, I am sure, I would imagine. And that is hard because you have people's, I mean, at the end of the day, people are
Yeah,
volunteers.
yeah,
And so how do you, create kind of a professional and ethical standard across an organization with so many people, and then you throw into the fact that you've got different state directors who are doing things that aren't necessarily under the control of the organization, the headquarters and things, and so that does make it quite an interesting prospect thing to
yeah.
challenge.
Well put. Yeah, well put. Those things generally don't make it down to the 6 or 7 members of the board. They're generally handled by the executive director, but every once in a while, one of them, obviously the Jan Harzan being a case in point, but every once in a while, one will sort of percolate down where the board actually has to get together with the executive director and discuss some action like that on a person. But man, that's very rare. And in this case, Dave McDonald would handle it in the course of his day-to-day running of the organization.
And so how are things going now? I mean, I noticed that the website has been updated again, and I actually do like the new look of the website. That looks it's good.
Yeah, things seem to be going pretty well, Erica. And the cases are flowing in like flapjacks. We're not, at one point in early 2010, MUFON had like 13 grand in the bank account or something like that. So we have enough operating funds, and we have the new headquarters here now in Cincinnati that I was at a couple of weeks ago and saw for the first time. And Dave's doing a good job of running the organization. And like you say, it's a difficult organization to run because you've got 500 field investigators and some other people who are not investigators but still part of MUFON. And they all are. It's a field that has a lot of big egos, as you can imagine. So yeah, he has his hands full, dealing with the little problems that come up all the time, as did Clifford Clift and Jan and the other directors before him. But he's used to running some big business organizations. He's got his airline and a flight school and all this kind of stuff. So he's doing a competent job, and we're in a good place right now. And MUFON's goal is to look into UFOs for the benefit of humanity, and it does this by investigating UFO sightings. So that's really our core business, if you want to think of it like that. So we have over 4,000 cases come in a year, and those 4,000 cases have to get investigated one way or another. And so I can't say MUFON has making a sudden outreach doing something it has never done before, but it's doing what it has always done in trying to investigate cases competently and expeditiously, so that we're not working on cases from 1995 or something like that. We're working on cases that happened last month or this month, that type thing.
And so how does, because we've heard a lot about, I mean, obviously we know Bigelow, came in and bought the database. I mean, and a couple
Right,
times
he bought access to it, yeah.
bought access. And so I mean, what are the control systems in place now to make sure that doesn't happen, or is that still a potential?
I guess it's always a potential for a hostile organization or somebody to hack a site, hack the MUFON site. We're not saying that it's impervious to government operatives or to people who have enough money or skill that they couldn't hack into MUFON. That can always happen. I mean, when I was with the patent office, China hacked into the personnel system of the U.S. government, and all our personal identification information was compromised. And they sent a message around saying that to us. This is the U.S. government, and that presumably had a lot of safeguards on their computer files, and yet China broke into it. So yeah, someone could hack MUFON, and we do what we can to make our software protected and the case management system protected. And by and large, it runs pretty smoothly, Erica. Once in a while, someone will hack into some part of it, but I mean, I'll be frank. If somebody in the government wanted to get the information in the MUFON files, I'm sure they could. And if they want to know about a particular case, they could ask any of us. We'll tell them about it. But if they want to hack in, I guess there's nothing we can do to stop them.
Right, absolutely.
We don't want that to happen, of course, but we're just resigned to it, or some other hostile actor.
And so what is the chain, like, a report gets entered into the CMS. Like, what are the first actions? Like, where it goes to this, to an admin or admins, and then what happens?
Yeah, it goes to the incoming cases, then will be sifted, and depending on what state they occurred in, they will be sent to the state director for that state. If it's Utah, your state, cases will be sent to the Utah state director. All 50 states, they're spread out to these states, and foreign countries too. We have Canada and get a lot of international cases. To be honest with you, there's now well over 1,000 a year that come in from non-U.S. countries, and once the cases are dispersed to the state director, he or she then allocates them to the field investigators under them, and the investigators then take up the case in due course. There's, again, sort of like the patent office, there's a time limit they have to work on these cases because we want cases to keep moving along. And I might be wrong here, but I'm sort of the wrong person to ask on some of the intricacies of this. But I think they have 90 days or 90 days or something like that to work on a case for the first time. But they generally do. And most cases are worked on in pretty short order. And when I look at the statistics on cases, I'll see maybe for a given month, maybe MUFON received 350 cases. And at the end of that month, if then the beginning of the next month, if I look back at the preceding month, man, most of the cases have gotten initial actions and investigations started. Either the witnesses have been contacted and the reports are starting to be written up. And there's very few that remain uninvestigated after 3 or 4 months have gone by. I can tell you that. They're pretty good for all these volunteers. It's remarkable, actually.
And that is so interesting. I've just got to ask, I've got a question from Tony. Are MUFON's UFO investigation reports consistent in quality state by state? And I think that having been a state director, I can answer that's a big no. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we want the cases to have a uniform quality, of course, but since you're dealing with 500 people with different educational backgrounds and different careers and time available, the cases do vary in quality. In general, they're all pretty good, I have to admit. MUFON tries to get all the field investigators to participate in ongoing training from their state directors and from courses that are put on something they call MUFON University. And you're very strongly recommended to take the courses on what you do with samples, in the field that might have been left from UFO markings, or samples left on a person's body, or samples left on a rock or something like that you can identify. How do you handle that case? How do you handle a case that has a vehicle stoppage? What do you do? And they're urged to take this training and to attend the courses that the state directors present in Zoom meetings or in-person meetings. We try to get them to adhere to various stipulations on how cases should be investigated in the MUFON Field Investigator Handbook. That's just another tool they can use to try to, how do I write a report? How do I interview a person? What do I do when I have a photograph? We try to get them up to this, all be acting and working on the same level. You don't succeed with all volunteers, of course, but they're pretty good. And I have occasion to look at hundreds of cases a year when I scan through the files to give some cases for some talks that I give. And they do a pretty good job.
And it's interesting because, I mean, having gone through that process and not having a background in this sort of thing, it was such a learning experience for me, becoming a field investigator and then becoming state director. And I really had to look at a lot of resources outside of the organization for input and training, and I think one of the things that you and I talked about when we spoke a week ago was the fact that there probably needs to be more attention paid to, drone technology and different types of things that we're seeing flying around in the skies now, because I think, you've got so much interference, so much clutter up there. And how is MUFON planning on addressing that and then adding more to the investigator's manual?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything specifically on drones. Last year at the symposium, however, in Las Vegas, we did have a seminar that people could attend, whereby an expert on drones, an aviator, gave an overview of the subject, and more it was based to how could you get a license to fly a drone, but it was supposed to impart information to the investigators on how drones are flown and how they act, and a little bit about how they look from below or in the night sky, this type of thing. But I don't think that there's a course so far on identifying drones when you get them in a case, but there probably should be. And yeah, you and I did speak about this, but that is a problem area, because there are now so many drones and there are so many different types of drones, and they're becoming ubiquitous, and they have different. How do the lights look on all these different types of drones? I don't know, but there are, I can tell you, not too many guides around outside of ufology for a drone handbook, for example. Let me see all the different types of drones there are. What are their aerodynamic characteristics? What are their lighting configurations? It's very hard to find a publication like that. Jane's All the World Aircraft, they come out with voluminous publications every year on literally all the world's aircraft. And they have one on unmanned aircraft and on drone systems that is probably pretty good. But if you want to buy that thing, it costs like $1,500. It's tremendously expensive. And that would probably have most of the drones that are extant, both military and civilian. But few people can afford that price. I didn't buy one, but I would like to have one. But yeah, we do need to focus more on drones. And still in all, they still act like all aerodynamic bodies act. There's certain things they cannot do that true UFOs seem to do. So that must always be kept in mind, that if you have a case that just an object comes from seemingly a mile away to hover in front of you 50 feet away in a second, and then goes back again to a mile away in another 5 seconds, that's not a drone. Drones don't do that kind of stuff. So you sometimes have to say, what are the characteristics of what we believe to be true UFOs, and is something doing anything that a true UFO would do that a drone couldn't do? That's a little bit of an indefinite answer there, I understand, but a lot of times that's the best you can do. If it's flying in a straight line across the sky and you hear a little buzzing noise and it seems to maybe come down a little bit closer to the surface of the earth, maybe you're dealing with a drone.
And that it's so interesting.
Oh, I've lost your sound there, Erica.
Dang it.
You're back.
Okay. All right. 48 minutes. I made it. That was good. Okay. Anyway, I just want to congratulate myself for that. Unmuting the mic. Thank you. And thank you, Rodan, for the wonderful contribution. I need to get you on the show. We need to talk soon. But with regard to human perception, I think there's so many interesting factors. And I know that Dr. Richard Haynes, who worked for NASA, that was his thing, is studying human perception. And so tell us how that factors into an investigation of a potential UFO sighting. Because, I know that from my own experiences, you can get pumped up and primed, and you can be, you can go to a location like Skinwalker Ranch, and then anything that you see could potentially be something that is abnormal, when in actuality it's just a plane flying over, or it has a mundane explanation. So how do we factor that in when we're looking at UFO cases?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. There's two parties involved here: the UFO investigators and the witness, of course, or the presumed witness. And I can tell you, even from kind of recent experience, that there are some people who have a lot of quote experiences, unquote, and they have them continuously, which is to say day to day. And some of them seem to involve UFO events. They'll see something hovering outside their window. they'll think something is in their room in the night then. And okay, it's not a one-time episode. It's something that keeps happening. And this person then will continue to call the MUFON investigator if they've taken the trouble to file a CMS case to begin with. And they can start calling you every day of the week or almost every day of the week with a new experience. And by God, they're serious. They seem to be extraordinarily disturbed and distraught at this. And you sort of have to just approach these things based on your knowledge of the UFO subject. Usually, and I emphasize the word usually, UFO events don't occur to an individual every day, where they go out and see a UFO every day and something's literally scaring the bejesus out of them every day. So if that starts happening and they called you already the fourth or fifth time in a row in a week, you start to think, boy, again, based on my prior knowledge of the UFO field, usually the phenomenon doesn't seem to work that way. This person might have something else going on in their lives, in their life. And there is a recent case here that I'm kind of familiar with, and it could be that it's due to a marital problem. It could be due to a stress that then becomes a true mental problem. A paranoia actually sets in where the person thinks, I really am being followed by some kind of another intelligence. I see them all the time. I can hear it in the night all around me. And then it's really almost outside of the investigator's purview, and the person really should be referred to a doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, as the case might be. But yeah, Erica, that question is difficult to answer there. Yeah, they try to in MUFON give you some training on how to deal with people who have very life-altering experiences. And we have an experienced or resource team that we can turn to if it's an abduction-like experience that a person is dealing with. But other than that, you have to use your common sense and any knowledge you might have on, like I said, the UFO field and what you can glean from, say, even medical case studies that you might know of. It's kind of easy to run afoul here, but if a person's seeing a UFO every day, they're probably not. You can't let it start dominating your life as an investigator, even,
Right. And I want to just go back and look at some chat comments and things. And so I know that somebody said that to compare a drone to the phenomenon is, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't quite find it, is ludicrous, basically. But I think that it's important, though, because as we know, there are many reports that we've received for decades that a person has misidentified something that is mundane, and so it is critical to researching the topic to make sure that everyone knows what drones look like, what airplanes, navigation lights, satellites, all of these things. So to me, yeah, I mean, of course, you would think the phenomena would be different than drones, but then I want to ask you, there are some people in the subject who claim that there's a mimicry going on, and so the phenomenon is basically mimicking some of our man-made technologies. I think, for me personally, that's just kind of an excuse or a lazy man's way of thinking of things. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've heard that same thing for decades, Erica, and it may be that they are. There have been some sightings, and I probably give them some validity, where the object seems to have terrestrial lighting on it. But then when the witness gets a better view of the object, although it has terrestrial aircraft lighting, red and green lights, a white light, all in the appropriate positions, when they get a better view of it in enhanced lighting in some way, it's revealed to be a discoidal object or a cigar-shaped object. So the lighting might mimic a terrestrial machine. If you're talking about a device that's morphing into what appears to be a human airplane or a human aircraft, this type of thing, yeah, that's a high strangeness case, and there might be a couple cases like that have occurred where it's, you can say, wow, I can't really explain this, but eventually you end up running up against, if people want to say that a plane can be a UFO and they can morph back and forth, that's almost an unfalsifiable premise. I can't prove you're wrong. And in science, we don't like things that are unfalsifiable, because there has to be a way of proving you're wrong or I'm right by using evidence. And if you can't use evidence, and you just have to fall back on, well, you said that was an IFO. I think it was a UFO. I think it changed into what you're saying it was, an airplane or the Starlink satellites or what have you. What can you do? You don't have the proof to show. You cannot falsify their premise, and you just have to say, okay, well, I've gone as far as I can. I think it's an airplane. I think it's a weather phenomenon, or I think it's a true UFO. But yeah, we investigators have run up against that for years, and it's a problem. And with the drones, to just go back a little bit, drones mimic some UFO technology, not necessarily consciously, but they do mimic some of the maneuvers of UFOs that we observed back in the 50s. For example, an object that can zip around in a small amount of space and make almost right angle turns, and quickly hover and quickly descend and quickly ascend again. Those are features of drone flight. And in 1950, if an object did that, the investigator might have said, well, yeah, that's a true UFO. Drones weren't ubiquitous, or they weren't even really present in human society at that time, other than as large, very, very large missiles that were launched by the military. Now, small drones can really move around in tight quarters, and their behavior can seem very odd when you see it in the sky. And there's no noise, and if they make some sound from those rotating rotors, but if they're 400 or 500 feet in the air, you'll see the lights, you won't hear the sound. It can look and fool a person into thinking it's a true UFO. So I'm not going to minimize the problems here that an investigator faces when they have to deal with drone technology or satellite technology, and the kind of satellites that are now launched, like the SpaceX is launching Starlinks, where 50 or 60 satellites are basically popped out one after another like chiclets in the night sky. That looks weird. And so there are some UFOs that are probably being misidentified as UFOs when they're really IFOs. But that's always been the case. But it's even more likely now.
And that makes it so difficult, especially with technology. And then I want to just read a comment. Wouldn't Occam's razor kind of eliminate a case where an object transforms into a human-type craft? Isn't the simplest explanation that they're, and we just got a couple more comments. Isn't the simplest explanation that they were always human craft and just came into focus or closer?
Yes, that is the simplest explanation. That is the explanation that I would tend toward to begin with. When I say that there might have been a handful of cases where some kind of true morphing occurred, or an object that was airplane shaped really wasn't a man-made aircraft, I could count those number of cases on one hand. So it's 5 or fewer. And in those cases, there were meticulous investigations and interviews of the witnesses done. The decisions were not made lightly. But yes, if somebody says to me, it just morphed into the UFO then morphed into an airplane shape, or you just saw it morph into an airplane shape and it really was a UFO. I can't prove they're wrong, but yes, in my mind, I would say, and probably put down as investigator, IFO was an airplane. That's what the witness described.
Okay, interesting. And so let me just get back, and great questions here. I just can't keep track of all of you guys. You've got some interesting comments tonight. I appreciate it. Tony wants me to ask you, does MUFON conduct studies into UFO witnesses? What conclusions are reached?
Studies into the witnesses. I'm not sure what is meant by that. Like, we don't do medical studies of them, or we don't give them money to go to a medical doctor to have things done, unless we suspect that they really have an injury on their body. I guess then we would try to maybe help them out or send them to an appropriate doctor or what have you. But we don't really do too many medical studies, if any, on witnesses. We try to take psychology into account when we're investigating a case, and if there do seem to be medical problems, yes, we look at those. But really, if it needs medical attention, of course, we're going to recommend that's the course that should be followed. Again, if we had a lot of money, yes, I think we could look at cases and try to do some kind of statistical studies on many witnesses and try to look into a certain type of object was seen, what kind of characteristics were evident in the witness after experiencing this kind of sighting. Did they feel ill? Did they have a rash on their skin? Did they suddenly develop paranoia? And maybe we could have seen some kind of a cause and effect here, but we're still at the point of just figuring out what the person saw in the sky.
And I mean, too, I think,
I
and
have a long
Tony,
answer.
no, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. But Tony's saying that close encounter witness studies using psychological and sociological analysis, and I know that has been done for decades, which is very fascinating to me, especially having the Ann Druffel files and knowing that she worked with several different groups that were focused on abduction studies and things, and looking at putting people through the paces and asking specific questions to rule out different things. And I know that in some of the readings I was looking at, or some of the things in her files, that people, it is alleged that people that have childhood traumas are potentially more prone to some of these abduction ideas.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing that should be done, and as Tony correctly mentioned, it hasn't been done. There was a long time ago by Elizabeth Slater, and she got a grant from the Fund for UFO Research, I believe it was, to look into people who had abductions, and she came up with some interesting aspects. But these are the kind of things that need to be done in clinical academic settings, almost, where you can pay a researcher to work full time, or at least put a lot of hours into collecting this data from people and doing, have a control sample of people and have a sample of people who believe themselves to be experiencers of some type, and you'll eventually come up with some insights into the phenomenon. But this could be done, but at this point, MUFON is not doing that actively. If somebody were to approach MUFON and say, wow, for $30,000, I could do such a study. I work I'm a university professor. I'm in psychiatry, I'm in psychology, whatever it might be. I'm prepared to do this study, but it's going to take this amount of time, and I would need $30,000. And I think we could work with that person ultimately to see that the study was carried out. We would not be averse to that. But again, we have neither the money nor do most MUFON investigators have PhDs in psychology. Just a few do, and they're in the experiencer resource team, which has its hands full. Let me just put it that way.
Yes, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But is there a potential that people, because you can share information like this so readily now, especially with social media, that people who are allegedly, or they believe that they're experiencing things, are putting, their information out there, that could potentially be manipulated for kind of more nefarious reasons. I mean, I fully believe that over the years, abduction research and things like that, and UFO sightings, things can be, you could take that data and you could create a profile on a person and then potentially manipulate a person's belief systems. I mean, what do you think about that? Is there that potential?
Well, yeah, a person could, and that was always one of the things that came up with 20 years ago when we were talking about the abductees that were working with Dave Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, and other researchers. Are these researchers themselves influencing their clients, as it were? Are they giving them, feeding them questions, or feeding them answers, and telegraphing the answer they want to get to build up a belief that they might have in the abduction phenomenon? And that certainly can happen, and can happen in reverse too, in the sense that it's not hard to read the abduction literature that's out there and craft a complete experience that's just a hoax, that's just completely made up. You could do the same thing with the UFO sighting, of course. So it becomes very difficult to then say, is this a hoax, or does this person really have a true abduction experience? And these are difficult things to deal with, and ultimately, it would be nice if we had some kind of a test we could use to determine who is maybe really experiencing abduction type experiences and who is not, and we can just apply this test with a few questions or giving them a blood test or whatever the case might be. But we're just not at that point. And you just have to question a person and work with them either from a medical basis or just in a relaxed setting in a room and see whether there are inconsistencies in their stories. Do they tell the same story 6 months from now that they told them when I first interviewed them, or is the story morphing as time goes on? And then you just have to make up your mind that, yeah, the witness is making this up or they're not. That's the best you can do sometimes. But that's what we tried to do with the abduction monitoring project years ago, was to take abductees, put an instrumented unit in their room. It could be a bedroom, it could be a living room, wherever an abduction might be thought to have occurred in, and get actual physical evidence of an intrusion into that space. And then you could look at enough of those cases and you might be able to say, yes, something really weird was going on here. We saw indications of a very bright light that occurred in their room. We have indications from the temperature indicator that the thermometer went down, and yet they didn't change the heat in their house. All these kind of things. And we're still not at that point where we can do that.
And thank you very much for answering that question. And I want to ask you, now we see, since the beginning of the subject, we see people that are inserting themselves into a narrative, and they're asking people to be a part of a research project. And then they're wanting to get medical studies or MRIs or blood work or different things like that. And then the same group of people is also leading the experiencer or the witness into believing that this is otherworldly technology. That, in my opinion, you can't conduct research and lead a witness. Tell us a little bit about the scientific method and what should or shouldn't be done, and why potentially, if you're approached by people who are claiming to be involved in a UFO study of people that are being hurt by UFOs, or have perhaps been genetically altered by a UFO encounter. What are just give me your thoughts on something.
Yeah, those are deep waters there. I would say that I'd be very suspicious if I were an experiencer of some type and had suddenly people come out of the blue and say that to me, that, hey, we want to start doing studies on you. We think you're an abductee, or we think such and such a thing has happened to you. I probably would say, I'd shy away from that. I'd probably say, no, don't get involved with someone like that who's coming from the outside and suddenly knows about you, or is trying to do this and get you involved in this, because it doesn't sound very good to me. When you work with an abductee, the best that we can really do in MUFON at this point, or even if we're not a MUFON person who's just investigating the experiencers, and I'm making a little bit of a differentiation here with just a UFO witness who sees an object just for one time only in their life, and it occurred for a minute and it's a good sighting, but it doesn't have the same effect on a person possibly as the whole linked series of experiences that are thought to occur to a person who is being abducted on a routine basis. The best thing you can do there is just sit down with them. Even if you're not a mental health therapist, just listen to their story, just get their story, and ask a minimum of questions. And that's about all you can do. If they seem to have additional problems that stem beyond your expertise, they can't remember something, or they're having medical problems, then you just have to refer them to the medical professional community. And maybe we'll eventually have enough of this medical data where we can make some conclusions as to what's going on. But I wouldn't ever go to a witness and say right off the bat, oh, wow, I think you're an abductee. I've heard a little bit of your story. Here, let me send you to this person. I think they can divine what's going on with you. That's not the way to act. And
thank you.
Stay away from them.
Thank you. And it's been amazing and alarming to me to hear from different friends of mine, different people in the subject who have been approached by the same kind of cast of characters that are, we think that you're special and you've been exposed to UFOs and you've got radiation, you've been exposed to radiation, and that's off-world radiation and different things like that. I mean, none of it just sounds even remotely kosher. And I think it's a dangerous path to go down, to give all your medical records, sign that away to people who are less than above board. But that seems to be the case. You know, you look at some things that Dr. Kit Green and Gary Nolan are specifically involved with, and kind of putting, you know, inviting groups of people to submit to medical testing and things that is pretty disturbing to me. But that's my own thought.
Yeah, it gets on kind of thin ice there sometimes. How do you get subjects if you think you have a theory? How do you get in what's going on in the abduction field? You need to get some subjects, people who have had abduction experiences. So you have to make a call for them, as it were. So, again, I would just say, if someone's coming to you wanting to do medical tests on you, don't fall for that. If your own experiences as a UFO witness or as an experiencer involve injuries that occurred to you, and you are the person who are generating the records, by the sense that in the sense that you went to a doctor because I had a strange light shine on me last night from something in the sky, and now my skin is, I've got seemingly very, very bad sunburn, then yeah, you are generating the records. You're going to the doctor, and that's then information is confidential between you and the doctor. If you want to share it with someone, that's up to you, outside of the doctor. But the doctor's not coming to you saying, "Oh, your skin looks a little odd. Let me just start doing some tests." That's dangerous.
Yeah, it is dangerous, and thank you very much for talking about that. I really appreciate that. I've definitely seen some interesting things as of late, and well, I mean, since I got publicly into this, who am I kidding? As you know, I had a ton of experiences, and a lot of that revolves around the Skinwalker. That's Mufasa. I don't think you haven't met Mufasa officially. This is Mufasa.
Yeah.
No,
I have not.
Yep, he's just to say hi for the
wow.
day. Well, yeah. He's my baby.
Yeah, if I could grab our cat who's wandering around here somewhere, I would do the same thing, but she'd never let me pick her up. Yeah, your baby's very beautiful.
Well, he's something. He's pretty cute. He loves to join the show. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you for letting me show him off. But I want to talk a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch and the latest creation from the Skinwalker PR team, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And what are your thoughts? I mean, my thoughts are, here we've got a lot of, and more, adding more things to the myth. Bigelow talking about a dino beaver. I'm not quite sure if he was looking in the mirror or what was taking place there, but it's, I mean, how does this help? I mean, how does this help the credibility of the subject?
Well, my thoughts on the Skinwalker Ranch might differ a little from yours, and you come from a different perspective and have a different insight into it than I have. You personally know people who have spent a lot of time on the Skinwalker Ranch. I do not. Years ago, which is to say around the turn of the century, and a little bit before that, the Fund for UFO Research, that was then very active, and I was with them, and still am in a way. We were interacting with Bigelow, and we also saw Colm Kelleher, and we heard the early stories on the Skinwalker Ranch back a little bit prior to when the book came out. And of course, thereafter, the Hunt for the Skinwalker book. And I always thought, and still do, because no one's proven to me otherwise, that Colm Kelleher was honestly relating what happened to him or what happened to scientists he knew at the ranch. And Lakatsky, who was one of the co-authors of the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book, he was the person that had no involvement in the UFO field until he interacted with Senator Reid, and he sent a letter to Reid, I guess it was, and eventually he got wound up into the Skinwalker thing. But Lakatsky didn't have any history in the UFO field before 2008 or so. And then Lakatsky visits the ranch for the first time, and he's there no sooner than 5 or 10 minutes when he sees a strange, I think he called it a technology or something in a room behind some people in the Skinwalker living quarters. And it completely blew his mind. And then subsequently, people associated with Colm Kelleher, with possibly Lukatsky, and with other people who are sort of unnamed in the book but are given pseudonyms, intelligence agency people and whatnot, went out there and they had things attached to them, which is to say hitchhikers, paranormal presences, so they say, that then suddenly appeared in Maryland and in maybe Virginia and in this area here where they lived and did their jobs. It never seemed to me, it doesn't seem to me that like Lukatsky's making this up out of sheer cloth. And so, having said that, when I read the Skinwalker, the second book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, I found that extremely disturbing, that this presence was attaching itself to people. And when I spoke with you last week, I said to you, if you should ever have a conference and want to take people on a tour of the Skinwalker Ranch, include me out. I'm just not going to go. So I'm disturbed by what seems to be happening at the Skinwalker Ranch. But the stories go back, like now that I've heard 20 years, and even maybe before. Is there some fire here? Where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's what I've always tended to believe. As weird as these stories seem, Erica, don't get me wrong here. I can't comprehend what people seem to be experiencing there at that ranch. So that's where I stand. I'm bothered by these stories, and they don't play a huge part in the book. The real story of the book is that the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon book, and it's kind of a bad title, is that the Defense Intelligence Agency and the government was here involved with the study of UFOs, or UAPs, whatever you want to call it. And the Skinwalker Ranch sort of fit into that and had its niche. But that's the real story, and the Skinwalker Ranch is a sideshow. Yeah, I'm not hearing it there, Erica.
Okay, I'm glad you couldn't hear me right then because I just said a bad word. But anyway, yes, great.
What was that word now?
Nothing.
Nothing. Oh, okay.
Maybe you could go back and read my lips.
I cannot read lips.
Anyway, so to me, I mean, obviously I talk about this every week because this has been my life. This has been what I've kind of, I've unfortunately or fortunately had the pleasure of digging into Skinwalker Ranch like most people have never dug into it. And I've found some pretty disturbing inconsistencies with the stories that a handful of people are putting out that cannot be backed up. And also, knowing that people involved, security guards that were involved and on the Bigelow payroll were hoaxing UFO sightings to fool onlookers and getting into different chat rooms to steer a narrative that Bigelow wanted to be put forward. And I think for me, if you truly have a place where all of these crazy things are happening, where people are being affected, people are getting radiation burns, people are having things follow them home, then you know what? You wouldn't create an entertainment industry based around that. You wouldn't be creating, bringing people to this area for UFO conferences and to take on tours around a ranch. You wouldn't have airline traffic over a ranch where you've got all of these things happening and a vortex opening up and, creatures coming out of this portal and, all this garbage. I mean, when you really step back and look at it, it's like, are you really? You're kidding me, right? It just sounds, it is stupid.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd have to say is, can we control people from doing that? Like the basic researchers there at the ranch, Colm Kelleher et al., they don't have anything to do with entertainment industries coming in, to the best of my knowledge. If an entertainment,
they're making money though off books, right?
Well, they are, but I can't criticize someone for writing a book on it. I don't think it's made a whole lot of money, but nonetheless, UFO researchers have been writing books since Kenneth Arnold, literally.
Well, but I'd be willing to bet The Hunt for the Skinwalker is probably one of the best-selling books of all time.
Well, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right.
So
maybe that's the case. I shouldn't say that it doesn't seem to be making much money, but maybe it is. Is Kelleher riding around on a Rolls Royce now and living in multi-million-dollar mansions? I don't know, but still, there's some stuff that's out of their control, and I want to believe. And you may say to me, Rob, you're being extremely naive, that my limited interactions with Kelleher seem to indicate an honest man. And Lakatsky, in coming to the ranch back in 2008, when some of this stuff wasn't as well known, and he wasn't involved in the UFO field, suddenly experiences something 10 minutes after he's at the ranch. Was he making that up? Was he delusional? Since they don't release any real data, I can't really say that he did have that. But it seems to me he too is an honest man. He was asked to speak at a local UFO conference here in this area. Lakatsky was, and he turned it down. He doesn't seem to want to have any desire to get involved with the UFO community, even to the extent of giving a lecture at a symposium.
Give it time.
Well, yeah, we'll see. You and I need to, along with some other people, continue this discussion, because what you say is disturbing, and it needs to be looked into. We need to determine, are the events at the Skinwalker Ranch true? Are they not? And
I think at the end of the day, if you've got, if these events are true, there's been no documentation, that there's no data. After how many years? 30 years? Nothing has been put forward to verify any of the alleged events that took place at the ranch. That's a problem. And when like I can go on to Twitter and ask the steward of the ranch, Brandon Fugel, about why aren't you transparent with the data? You said this is what you were going to do, yada yada yada, and I'm blocked. And he, there's some sort of hissy fit involved with that. It's that raises a red flag to me. And it was interesting because I spoke with Barry Greenwood earlier today, and he had a great comment, and I wonder if I probably don't even have it. I wrote it down, but it just, he said that over the decades, when people don't have information, when they don't have real data to back up what they're saying, they will be the most angry people and do the deflection kind of routine, which is what happened, on Twitter, frankly. And so, and I see that happening. If you've got information and you are not involved in a government project, as Mr. Fugel has stated multiple times over the years, then you would think that he would be forthright with that data. And his answer when asked that question is, well, this is what I'm putting forward on the TV show.
Yeah, that's. I think Fugel's more of a problem than a solution to this here. Leaving him out for the moment. They've apparently collected data now on the ranch for a long, or they have a long time, at least 10 years of data collection at the ranch, from the first explorations by Bob Bigelow when he wasn't involved with the government, through the OSAP investigations with Kelleher and Lakatsky and everything like that, where they seemingly collected voluminous data in a variety of subject areas like seed testing, radiation testing, and having cameras up to remotely survey the ranch. And so they do have data, but okay, they've never released it. That is a big problem, I understand. That's not how science operates. And if you look at the end of the Skinwalker book and the appendices, all that material has been sent to the DIA. Now, as you had observed, they can't find the Skinwalker report. There were many reports that were sent to them. Presumably they have their hands on some, but it's all classified. They're not letting it out. So if they can prove some of these allegations, they haven't done it other than the testimony of what's in the book. And that's words on a page, I understand. But we need to have the data out. But believe me, I am no fan of government investigation into UFOs. I do not think that the government is going to, if they have any answers and they have some solutions, they're not forthright about them. They're not transparent about them. They're continuing to cover them up. And I don't think we're really going to get answers on the UFO subject, including the Skinwalker Ranch, till we have non-governmental people looking into this in an open, transparent manner. And that means doing due diligence on scientific research, publishing your results in refereed journals and having it replicated by other researchers. That's what needs to happen at the ranch. And Bob Bigelow may have the best data in the world, and Lakatsky and OSAP may have had the best data in the world that they sent to DIA, but it's not doing anybody any damn good if it's above top secret. And so, you know, in short, to hell with them. And that's why I have always been a firm proponent of let's get more of the civilian research community, and that costs money, involved. And we will start getting answers there. We might not like the answers. We might be terrified of the answers, but we will get answers because I am a firm believer and proponent that scientific theory it works. It does reveal insight and knowledge to us about the world. And we haven't really done the basic kind of transparent research on Skinwalker Ranch or even the UFO phenomenon as a whole that needs to be done.
Right.
You're absolutely for 75 years now.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right, and that is really important, and I think that is the thing that we've heard from the people that are involved with Skinwalker Ranch now, that they would be transparent with the data, and that has not happened. And like I said, if a TV show where you're creating, putting out even more nonsense, if is being transparent, I don't really think that's the case, but show the information, work with other scientists or researchers. Brandon Fugel's big thing was when he got involved that he wasn't going to be beholden to the government for funding for his project, and that he would be transparent, and that there would be live 24-hour cameras on the ranch, and things like that, and that hasn't been the case. But what we have seen is a lot of funding has gone into development in the Uinta Basin, specifically Vernal and Roosevelt, and now they're hosting big UFO conferences, even though I don't know how they can sustain a UFO conference when they don't have hotel lodging for all of the people coming in, and the transportation. That's another story, because you have to fly into Salt Lake and then drive, blah, 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 blah. There's so many logistics, but there has been a great deal of funding pumped into that area. And like I've mentioned on different shows, it is interesting that Mr. Fugel is on the governor's economic advisory board and the COVID advisory board. And so, those are interesting things to look at. And for me, when I talk about this subject, I have done a great deal of digging into people's backgrounds, obviously, as they've done with me. And so I think that that's important, because there is a bigger picture here. This isn't just a pure person who's got a love of this subject, who's trying to, do something because it's so cool and he's a kid in a candy store. There's a motivations there. So
Yeah, you could very well be right. I don't watch that TV show, in all candor, but eventually it becomes something like, what is it, Oak Island out there in the right off the coast of Canada or whatever. They started making the TV show on that. Now, there originally seems to have been a true mystery with Oak Island, I think it's called, but nonetheless, years and years and years of that TV show completely destroyed any possibility of us getting evidence of what might have been there at Oak Island. It just became a complete carnival, unscientific, and if anything really occurred there, it's beyond our ability now as humans to determine what that was. And the Skinwalker Ranch seems to be following a little bit of a course like that, at least from what you're saying. And you sensationalize the hell out of the thing, and true science is cast to the side. True science isn't done by having someone like Fugel come in and sort of open it up into an entertainment industry. Then he invite in groups of scientists, if you want, controlled a number of people. Let them set up their experiments as they see fit, then report on the results if you really want to uncover what's going on there. If you don't do that, then I think we all know that you're just an entertainer, as you say.
Thank you.
We'll see. Maybe time will tell, as George Adamski once said.
Oh, well, that is true. No, and time will tell, and it has. If you look back at the past 30 years, it has told us some things, so we just
That's
need to be
fine. It's getting
smart
late,
enough.
no doubt.
We need to be kind of cognizant of that. But I am going to, I would like to ask you about some of your favorite cases that you've worked on over the years with MUFON.
Well, I haven't worked on, believe it or not, I'm on the board, but I haven't worked on a lot of cases. But I have, I've occasion to look into cases just for the purpose of elucidating people and doing talks or something. What are some of the latest cases and this type of things? So I could talk about a little of those. Unfortunately, I will have to look down at some notes I made because I haven't committed these cases to my mind. But non-MUFON cases, it's sort of like all people who have been in the UFO field for a long time. And like you, Erica, I have favorite cases that I've spoken about a lot, not necessarily MUFON cases. I talk about Delphos or Kevin Randall's almost favorite case, Leveland, the Arnold case, and Nash Fortenberry, all these classic kind of cases. But that's the problem here now, is that I can rattle off a list of historic classic UFO cases that are truly puzzling, but I can't rattle off a lot of puzzling cases that occurred from 2015 to 2022, because that doesn't seem to happen anymore. When other old timers in the field get together, they never talk about cases that just happened last week or a couple months ago. And even I can't really come up with, I can come up with some because I have some here to speak about, but they're not at the tip of my tongue. I have to study a little bit ahead of time to be able to talk about them. So short of telling you about cases you already know about, let me see if I can find a couple here that'll be kind of interesting, that are recent ones here. I'll try to keep it real short.
No, that's wonderful. I love it. I appreciate it. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I'll start off with the Utah case. I suddenly realized it was Utah, and that's where you are. And but yeah, this was a case. This was a pretty good case. It occurred over Zion, Utah. You may know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
It occurred from an airliner in September of 2019, not that long ago. The pilot of an airliner at 40,000 feet, he had co-pilot in the plane, of course, headed west. He could see a white, and I hate to use this expression, tic-tac shaped object below, but really it was a capsule shaped object, like an elongated oval, a short cigar. And he thought it was 15, 20 miles away on a slant from his aircraft. And he used his cell phone to record about 30 seconds of this object passing below the plane against the surface of the ground. It's very clear. The footage is very clear in the system, the CMS system. I was flying over mountainous terrain. I got 50 seconds of this using a video. And he observed the whole thing for about 3 minutes. So he got just a fraction of that time that he recorded. One of the odd things is he never alerted the co-pilot to it. I don't know why. Maybe that the co-pilot just wasn't situated in such a point that he could look over and see it. That's not revealed in the record. But the footage shows clearly an object that looks like a Bayer aspirin or something like that going over the landscape, very white. There's no lifting surfaces on it. There are no wings. There's not a horizontal stabilizer. There's no exhaust coming out the back. It's just moving in a straight line across the terrain, and it's unconventional looking. So that's an unknown. That's an oddity. And there was a second case somewhat like that occurred in December of 2020, a couple of years ago now, well, almost a year and a half ago, where another fellow, a pilot who was traveling on an aircraft as a passenger on an aircraft bound for Seattle, spotted and photographed below his aircraft a similar elongated cigar-shaped object, and it was seen by other people in the aircraft sitting around him. They couldn't explain that either. So that was another good photographic case we have. And that case lasted about a minute. And Eric, I'm not sure you're here, but I'll excuse me. I'll carry on with the losing my voice here, and carry on with the montage of sightings. And for those that are still tuned in here, there was an odd case. I'm not going to say it's a UFO case because it wasn't a UFO case, that occurred in La Crosse, Washington, in February of 2020. A very odd case that might give us some clues into the UFO subject. This was made by a witness walking his dog outside at around midnight on the 8th of February of 2020, a little over 2 years ago. And he was passing under a spotlight, a street light in the street, and he suddenly saw a line of small, what he described as small beings, only like 1.5 to 2 feet tall, walking in a line, straight line, crossing the road in front of him, dragging a dead cat behind them. Okay, this is a high strangeness case. And his dog assumed the witness's dog assumed a defensive stance, suddenly started growling and not wanting to move. And these beings walked across the street. They walked up on the opposite side, which was just a grassy bank, and there was a field there, an open field. And as they proceeded across the field, they were joined by 2 other beings who seemed to be sort of rear guards to this little procession of people. And when those 2 other beings noticed that they were being witnessed by the observer with his dog, they suddenly started making squeaking noises, and they were very agitated. They were very disturbed. The whole group of these things just moved into the field, at which point, and again, this is what the witness is saying. I'm not saying it necessarily occurred as this, but the witness describes a white streak in the air, a vertical line that just expanded. All these beings walked through this now white square in the air at ground level, pulling the dead cat with them, and the square contracted into a line and disappeared, and the guy was left out there by himself in the field. So very, very odd case. These beings didn't have clothes on them. He noticed that they were male. Some of them were carrying something in their hands, but they all disappeared. And this case is completely a high strangeness. It was given an unknown explanation. I don't know what to make of it, but it falls. Similar beings like this have been seen in ufology and outside of ufology and other lore, fairy lore, leprechaun lore, whatever you want to call it. But nonetheless, the fact that they seem to have disappeared into another dimension is kind of a telling incident here. And this guy was very unsophisticated, according to the investigator. He was a young man, 18 or 20 years old, who was sort of a knockabout around the town and just did odd jobs for people. Didn't really have a job he went to every day. And they never found a dead cat lying on the street later on, nor did he recognize the cat that was being dragged along. But that's all I have to tell you on that story. Very odd.
Wow, that is very odd. Thank you for sharing.
Let me go into one other one. I don't know how much time we have, but I don't want to bore our I was going to say listening audience, our viewing audience too much here. It's another aspect of another type of cases that I personally particularly like. They don't occur very often, and that is cases of UFOs or UAP that look like faceted jewels. That's the best way I can describe it. Jewel-like objects. Sometimes they're elongated. Sometimes it's an octahedron or a tetrahedron, an 8-sided structure, 4-sided structure. But they look like cut gems, like you would have set in a ring or a piece of jewelry. And these kind of sightings have occurred almost from the inception of the modern age of ufology. And again, I'm not saying I understand these types of cases. I don't, because they don't seem to have any, they make no sense. Alien beings come here from another star system, if that's what you want to think, and they fly an object that looks like a tetrahedron with facets on it, looks like a jewel. But they've been reporting these cases infrequently, but steadily through the years. And there was a case here that occurred in April of 2020 in Macclesfield, the United Kingdom. It was a case from England where a guy couldn't sleep in the night, got up to go to the bathroom. He walked through his living room or whatever, and he has a skylight in the room. He can look outside. It's, what time is it? Between 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning. It's dark. He looks up, he sees, in this case, it was a diamond-shaped object, his words, seen through the skylight there in an octahedron. So 2 4-sided pyramids put base to base, if you want to think of it like that. He could see the sky. It was clear. He knew it was a moon. There was a bright moon outside. He distinguished it from the moon, apparently. He was looking directly up at the underside of this object, and it sort of had a gray kind of a matte structure. It wasn't reflecting light, only the light coming from the room in his house, I guess, through the skylight. And it also looked metallic in appearance. It seemed to be very close to the house. it just stayed there. He had to use the bathroom, so he quickly went to the bathroom and came back. But by the time he came back, you guessed it, the object's not there. It was gone. But this is these crazy jewel-shaped objects keep occurring, and that's an example of one. There's another one in England that occurred in 1986 or so. That was a large pyramid that a fellow was riding a motorbike in England. His bike suddenly stopped. And he was going to work late at night at like 1:30 in the morning, and his motorbike suddenly stopped. And he thought, geez, I cannot believe it. What's wrong with my bike? And he got off the bike and he looked up, and like literally right above him was the base of he saw a huge square above him is what he saw, with some lights coming down, shining down on the ground. And this object slowly drifted off to his right, I guess, and he saw that it was just the base of a gigantic pyramid that then slowly flew off into the night sky. It wasn't a balloon. It had mass. It was enormous. And he never could get his motorbike started. He had to walk the bike home. And later after that, here's the case that had the medical case. He had very bad health problems after that seemed to be directly related to this sighting here. I'll see if I have a short description of those things. I don't have I recall seeing what his medical problems were, but I can't quickly bring them to hand here. But yeah, something was wrong with his skin, and he had digestive problems and all this kind of stuff. That seemed to emanate from this sighting. But again, these kind of cases intrigue me just because they're consistently seen, and yet they make no sense. So those are a couple recent sightings, and there's even some more I have from January. A guy saw a close craft with multicolored lights and managed to get a good video of it. The lights seem to be arranged in a circle or a square, and they have a pretty good angular width in the video at night. And believe me, I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of videos that people have submitted of supposed UFOs taken with their cell phones and other cameras, and most of them, I hate to say it, aren't too good. They're dots of light in the night sky. This particular one is good. And again, I don't know what to make of it, but something seemingly more than a passing aircraft or a street light was in the sky at the time the fellow took that video. Let me give you one other one here. This is from a case in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. That should immediately raise some recognition there in people. The Kelly Hopkinsville, where people shot at aliens, presumably or apparently in the 1950s, 1955. Here we have a case coming from Hopkinsville again, a simple sighting of a triangular-shaped craft, but they did get a picture of it, and the lights have very wide angular width on the picture, on the video, I should say. And again, having looked at hundreds of these, I can differentiate these from stars on the video or lights of a passing plane or a street light or anything like that. It seems very odd. It seemed to land in a forested area nearby and then take off again. But the investigator of the case was not able to get to the landing spot because at the time the case was written up in early February, the weather was too bad, and I think it was a woman. She just couldn't get out there to try to find where it was in this forested area. And so that case again was given an unknown disposition, as we say in MUFON. And so those are kind of good cases. They're not on the level of Socorro, or they're not on the level of Nash Fortenberry in 1952, but really that's the soul of the UFO phenomenon, are very puzzling cases like this, not necessarily high strangeness all the time, but still puzzling to the witness. And sometimes they can get proof of these things that are still showing up. Let me throw a couple numbers at you here, just so you will know what exactly, how many sightings are we talking about here reported in MUFON. In January of 2022, just 3 months ago almost, January of 2022 had 279 cases reported to MUFON. February had almost 200, 199, for a total of 478 cases reported. Most of those cases have been investigated. 61% were found to be unexplained. I think that comes out to 13% or something like that. In January 2021, we had a year previously, the same 2 months, we had 521 sightings. about 40 cases more, with 132 unknowns, and the unknown rate was a little higher in January and February of last year. But the point being, we're talking about a lot of cases here, on the order of 4,300 cases a year that MUFON is getting, and the unknown rate is hovering around, to use a ufological expression, no pun intended, around 20% or so with MUFON cases. Peter Davenport's National UFO Reporting Center, it outdraws MUFON in numbers of cases, but and he seems to get some good ones. But the problems with Peter's site, maybe you've had him on your show, Erica, is he doesn't. Most of those cases aren't investigated,
Right.
so he gets $4 or $5 grand a year of cases, and they're just not investigated. There is an overlap with MUFON cases, but we don't know what the overlap is there. No one's done the statistical research into that, which would be tedious.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to just monopolize the whole segment here.
No, I love that.
Do you have any questions or anything?
No, that's great. I mean, and so I do have a couple questions about, because MUFON has gone through so many changes and things have been, tumultuous in the past few years. How have the case reports coming into MUFON, has that seen a dip? Is it seeing an increase? I mean, with social media and things now, obviously people are going to different social media groups and posting information instead of maybe taking the time to get on a site like, Peter's or the MUFON site. I mean, what are you seeing? What trends are you seeing in that regard?
That's a good question. And darn it, I knew this was going to come up because I did all the trends for 2000 to 2021, but I just didn't want to bore people with numbers, so I didn't bring those figures here. But they appear in the latest issue of the MUFON Journal that's just come out. That would be the March issue of the journal, I believe. I presented those figures there. But yeah, they're neither. There's no. It's not. The curve is just not going up all the time. Some years have more cases than others, but MUFON seems to have stabilized out around. Sometimes there might be 3,800 cases in a year, and sometimes it might go up as high as 5,300. But it goes up and down. It's sort of a little bit cyclical, and it's the same thing with the monthly cases. Some months there are more cases, but I am not aware that there has been. We don't seem to get those huge waves the way we used to get them in the last one occurred in 73 maybe, and we got them in 52 and 57 and this type of thing. Those don't seem to occur anymore, and whether that's because social media. It's now easy to file a UFO case, so a lot of people are doing it, and we get cases from all states. I don't know. Does the UFO phenomenon not act in the way it used to act before, and suddenly focus on one area of the country for an intense barrage of cases that then fades away? I don't know, but that's how it tends to be. It never goes up to 10,000 so far, and it hasn't gone down to just 200 or 300 a year. It always stays pretty high.
Okay,
there never seems to be a shortage of sightings going on. But I think it has been that way throughout the 75 years of UFO history. Years ago, it wasn't as easy to report a case, and we missed an awful lot of them. Now we miss fewer of them.
That's good, and thank you for sharing that. I'd be interested to read the latest issue.
Yeah, it's very short. So yeah, I mean, I didn't write too much, and you'll see that I made some nice graphs there, and they really show what's going on here with regard to how these cases stack out with knowns versus unknown type things.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to, because we're getting ready to wrap up the show, but I want to talk to you a little bit about archiving and this, the fact that we need to be preserving history, and there are lots of files that have kind of gone into the trash, or they've fallen into the hands of people that aren't necessarily going to be sharing them with other researchers or the public. Can you speak a little bit about MUFON's archiving efforts and whether specific holdings that MUFON has right now will be made available to researchers or to the general public?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erica. My answer to that is a short yes. MUFON is intending to make the whole CMS files available to the general public. They've all been digitized, and to the best of my knowledge. And now we're acquiring some files from foreign countries. But Dave McDonald's vision, if you want to look at it like that, is to create a large central repository, a large database of these files online. They'll all be digitized. Cases from MUFON, cases that come in from other countries. I don't know how we're going to get how to digitize all those necessarily, but I think a lot of those are digitized, and some kind of a translation program will be used so that you could get a rough translation of the report if it's in French or if in German or Indian or whatever it might be. But yeah, we're working rather intensively on this, and it's a matter of getting. And this is just a necessary thing that has to happen. All these cases that MUFON has, not only on the CMS system now, but cases that were just on paper prior to the CMS system, so prior to 2002, say, all those cases have been scanned and they're all digitized. That's the good news. They have to take the names and addresses of the people out of there. They call it redaction. That's what the government calls it too. But they're taking out personal identifying information for people. And that seems to be a real holdup. But I think that they're mostly through that. And I've never worked on that area, but they have some people who have put a lot of time in on that. But yes, it's hoped that they will then have the server capacity to host all these cases, put them up there, and combine them with the Center for UFO Studies database as well, which is being archived, I want to say as we speak, but it's sort of true, in Albuquerque, New Mexico right now, by Dave Marler, whom you might know. Mm-hmm. And Dave is sort of spearheading that effort to digitize those files, and maybe over 25% of those have been scanned. And so somehow this huge database is going to be made available. I don't know anything beyond that. It's a snotty problem to work out, but do we charge people for that? If so, how much do they get charged? Because a certain amount of money is required to keep the servers going, and to put these cases up there. None of that's been worked out, but I hope to God that it's soon, because these cases are a vast trove of information on the phenomenon that not only people in MUFON and the field of ufology per se can look at, but people who are now not involved in ufology might have a reason to look at cases if they suddenly find I can do statistical research on, I don't know what, 100,000 cases or more maybe, and the complete write-ups of these cases. It's extraordinarily valuable.
It absolutely is. And so, I mean, what is happening, like, say, with Michael Swords and his, vast archive? Are there plans to perhaps digitize any of his work?
A lot of his work has been digitized. Now, Mike Swords, for those who may not know, is a retired professor who lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Mike used to have an enormous house, and he moved from this enormous house. He sold it to a fellow who's interested in ufology, and Mike has moved into an independent living place. He's got smaller quarters. He's about 80 now. Don't tell Mike I said that. And he's still vastly interested in the subject, but a lot of his files have been digitized, and that's up to Mike whether he wants to get them out there into the world. He owns the things, but he also has an enormous archives, and that still resides in his house. And so, yeah, ultimately that is, it's hoped that his house will become a place that researchers can go to and study these cases, study these files. There's tremendous amount of magazines and case reports and other publications there. It's not just cases, it's not just magazines. There's books and all kinds of stuff. It's huge. And yes, it's this fellow who's bought this place is an executive, I think, in a medical industry. He's a PhD biochemist or something like that, and he intends to make these files as available as he can. And he is very interested in scanning stuff, but I can't tell you exactly how this is going to work itself out over the years ahead. But
and so where did Mike West, I believe, who was in charge of Swords archive, and so how did he get involved in the UFO subject? Do you know much about his background?
Not too much. I have somewhere I have a curriculum vitae of him starting these industries. He's always been interested in UFOs, but he's I think one of his main area of interest is in survival of the consciousness and this kind of stuff. He likes looking into these kind of things as well, as I seem to recall Robert Bigelow does.
Mm-hmm.
But he's very interested in UFOs. But I have to say he doesn't have the background that some of the other people have, like Mike or say Mark Roddiger, because this fellow has not been studying the UFO subject much more than since after 2017, when the story broke in the New York Times. That really got his interest going. So he's still in the learning mode regarding what has gone on in history. But he bought Mike's house and he's keeping the collection there, and he's buying instruments and equipment to digitize a lot of this stuff, professional equipment from what I've heard. So I'm hoping that it'll eventually make its way out to Kalamazoo and start the digitization project. And then that this will be made into a more of a research community that's available too. We can't just open to the public at this point, but to researchers who have a need to study this kind of stuff and, do research or write a book or whatever it might be.
Right, and I think, you did make a good point about the fact that there's a cost to this. There has been a cost, for you and for me, a considerable cost to acquire different holdings and to keep them in a secure location, to digitize them. I don't think I'll ever break even on that or even begin to make, it's
none of us will.
Labor of love but it is important, I think, for the public. It's like we say, okay, make all of this available to the public. I think that would be ideal in everybody's mind, but I think the public does need to understand that there is a cost to this. And for people like Barry Greenwood or Jen Aldrich, people Dave Marler, myself, you. It takes time away from our regular jobs where we're doing this and trying to preserve it and being meticulous and things, and then potentially opening up our archive to the public and providing education. It's not, that there's no reason why people shouldn't be, they shouldn't be paid for the time and effort that they put in to this, because they are serious professionals who are doing this. And so I think that's definitely something that, the public needs to be aware of and things. So it is great that Dave Marler has been good at getting, specific funding for his project, as he should. I hope in time that I will actually receive some good funding to archive Alice Druffels files, and the other holdings that I have here. And then, like you and I have talked about, potentially have, a meeting of some of the archivists and researchers in Salt Lake. And I will take you to Skinwalker Ranch.
Not going, Erica.
Oh, come on.
Unless you can convince me
What's
something
a
more.
hitchhiker or two? Oh, come on, jeez.
Or give me the
Trust me.
proper, I'll use the weird word I always want to use, atropaic, things I need to ward off evil spirits. Then I might go.
That could be fun. If nothing else, I'm sure that, some camera somewhere would be taking a picture of us standing like, a couple of dorks in front of the Skinwalker sign. Because that's, everybody's got to do that at least 10 times.
Well, maybe I'll go right to the border of it and not actually cross over.
Well, it wouldn't be hard. All you got to do is step over a 2-foot fence.
Then it'll attach to me.
Exactly. You're doomed.
When I'm doomed, exactly.
Yep, you are. You might go to bed and see a Mobius strip or some secret hand that
Right over my head.
materializes out of the,
Terrifying. Wish you hadn't mentioned that.
Well, what can I say? I've got to leave you on a...
That's a terrifying note.
I know. Pray to the Holy Mother, and it's okay. Bathe in holy water. You're good.
Okay, thanks, Erica.
Anytime. That was my professional advice. So, but I appreciate it. And again, I've always enjoyed talking to you, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to address some of the subjects that I don't think a lot of the other people in MUFON would address publicly, and that speaks volumes for me, and I know for the people listening to the show, about your character. I think that's great that you do that.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I hope I haven't bored people, and I may not be on the board after this, but nonetheless, you know, that's what this is a puzzling phenomenon, and we're all intrigued by it, and we want it to be understood for whatever it is. Where let the chips fall where they may. I tend to think they're going to fall into an extreme, kind of a weird place with non-humans, but that's my opinion. But we need to find out.
Right, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think for me, it's kind of become, unfortunately or fortunately, my mission to try to expose some of the, the people in the subject who are manipulating the subject for their own gain, and it's not in our best interest, and so hopefully we can see that for what it is. We can step over those landmines that people have been walking straight into decade after decade and buying the same recycled story decade after decade. And we can actually get to the meat of what we all really love and want to know more about, which is the phenomenon itself. And so I just think it's really important. And
we don't want to be led astray. That's
right.
And which has happened too often.
Absolutely, it has. And I just want to thank you very much for all of your work, and thanks for talking about some of the latest cases and all of that. And I wish you the best, you and Sue.
Yes, thank you, Erica.
Wonderful weekend.
My best. God bless you, and
thank you.
Thanks for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to be here for these 2 hours. It truly is, and I look forward to doing it again here.
Well, you will, trust me. So thank you very much, and I want to just tell everybody out there listening to the show, thank you for supporting me, and thank you for always being here. And if you want to go to UFOclassified.com to click on the link to become a show supporter, that would be wonderful. It also helps archiving and things like that. So I appreciate you all very much. And just know that at the end of the day, I am here for the greater good of all of us and to find the truth. And you have seen, me go through this learning process, and I've been very open about that. And I will always admit when I'm wrong, because I think that we all should be doing that in this subject, and we could really do some great things if we're humble and searching for the truth. And so thank you all very much for supporting me. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, and thank you, Mario. You guys have a wonderful evening. Be safe, and I will catch you next week.
Good night, Erica.
Good night.